It's strange how clarity arrives in the silence after destruction. Like that moment when a wave retreats from shore, pulling back to reveal what was always there beneath the churning surface. I remember the exact shade of blue in the sky that morning 5 years ago today when I first understood that my destruction had been meticulously planned. It wasn't an accident or workplace politics gone wrong. It was surgical. It was personal. And the architect sat 3 offices down, smiling at me every morning for 2 years while he dismantled everything I'd built. The first indication was subtle. My name disappeared from the Jensen Project email thread, the cornerstone account I'd cultivated for 18 months. When I checked the shared drive, I found my strategy documents renamed, modified, their original creation dates altered. Small changes, the kind you question yourself about before you question others. Maybe I misremembered, I told myself, staring at my monitor at 9:47 p.m., scrolling through version histories that suddenly didn't match my meticulous notes. Daniel had always been charming, that practiced corporate charm that reads authentic to those who haven't learned to identify its manufactured edges. His handshakes lingered exactly 1 second longer than necessary, his eye contact calibrated for maximum effect. Executive presence, they called it in leadership seminars. The thoughtful gift of premium noise-canceling headphones after I mentioned a noisy neighbor in a passing conversation. The invitation to his lake house that never seemed to materialize. He collected people like rare coins, polishing them with attention before locking them away in the display case of his network. I was useful to him until I wasn't. Until the reorganization put us in competition for the same position. Until my performance metrics started outpacing his in-monthly dashboards. Until the client feedback consistently mentioned my name instead of his. Elizabeth, do you have a minute? His voice at my office door that Thursday afternoon carried the same warmth it always had. We walked to the coffee shop across the street, where he stirred 2 sugars into his Americano and asked concerned questions about my workload, my stress levels, whether I was sleeping well. "I'm worried about you," he said, eyes crinkling at the corners with practiced concern. "I've been hearing things." That night, I received an email from HR requesting a meeting the following morning. No agenda attached, just the sterile conference. Room designation and a calendar invite weighted with unspoken accusations. I remember adjusting my blazer before entering room 4C, smoothing non-existent wrinkles, a ritual of control before facing the uncontrollable. 3 faces turned toward me, our HR director Maya's expression professionally neutral, our COO. Richard's eyes not quite meeting mine, and my direct supervisor Christopher's face flushed slightly at the temples, the way it always did when he was uncomfortable. "We've received some concerning reports," Maya began, sliding a folder across the polished table surface. Inside were printouts of emails I had allegedly sent, containing confidential client information transmitted to external accounts. Emails with my signature line, my formatting preferences, my linguistic patterns, but words I had never written, thoughts I had never expressed. Digital ghosts wearing my identity like an ill-fitting suit. "This isn't me," I said, voice steady despite the earthquake happening beneath my ribs. "I didn't write these." Richard finally looked at me then, pity and disappointment performing a complicated dance in his expression. "We've verified the server logs, Elizabeth. They came from your account." The sick feeling that spread through my stomach wasn't just fear, it was recognition. 2 months earlier, I had arrived unusually early to finish quarterly projections and found Daniel at my desk. His explanation about dropping off revised meeting notes sounding reasonable at 6:45 a.m. when the office was still dark and my coffee hadn't yet cleared the mental fog. My password, written on a yellow post-it and tucked into my desk drawer, a corporate cardinal sin I'd justified because of the company's aggressive 14-day password change policy. I remembered his casual lean against my desk, his eyes tracking the drawer as I reached for a pen. In the HR meeting, I watched my professional reputation dissolve in real time, Years of meticulous work undone by fabricated evidence I couldn't disprove fast enough. The investigation would be thorough, they assured me. In the meantime, I was being placed on administrative leave. Security would accompany me to collect my personal items. My badge access was already suspended. The walk back to my desk felt like a funeral procession. Eyes averted as I passed, uncomfortable coughs punctuating the unusual silence of the normally bustling floor. Only Daniel met my gaze directly, concern painted precisely on his features as he stood from his desk. "Elizabeth, everything okay?" I knew then, in the perfect inflection of his question, in the calculating softness behind his eyes. The emails were just the beginning, the visible part of a sabotage so complete, I wouldn't see its full architecture until months later. The rain was falling in sheets when I left the building. Cardboard box balanced awkwardly against my hip, security badge already missing from around my neck. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Whatever's happening, I'm here if you need to talk." The perfect colleague, concerned but respectful of boundaries. The perfect predator, circling back to examine his handiwork. The administrative leave, stretched into termination after the company's investigation found irrefutable evidence of data breaches originating from my access credentials. References evaporated. LinkedIn connections quietly disconnected. Former mentors became suddenly, perpetually busy. My carefully constructed professional world collapsed with architectural precision, each support beam removed exactly in the order that would ensure complete structural failure. I applied for 17 positions in the first month, made it to final rounds for 3 before mysterious calls seemed to derail promising interviews. The severance package covered exactly 3 months of my mortgage. The savings account I'd been building for a down payment on a house began its steady decline toward zero. Each night I stared at the ceiling, replaying conversations, meetings, interactions looking for the moment I should have seen it coming. The warning I had missed. Daniel's promotion announcement appeared in my LinkedIn feed exactly 6 weeks after my termination. The photo showed him smiling in front of the company logo, accepting a handshake from Richard. The position had been mine in all but title before the fabricated emails emerged. The comments section filled with congratulations, including several from clients I had personally brought to the firm. Christopher, my former supervisor, wrote, "Couldn't have happened to a more deserving professional. Your integrity and dedication make you perfect for this role." Integrity. The word glowed on my screen like a coal, burning into my retinas as I sat in my darkened apartment, the second notice for my electricity bill sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. In that moment, something inside me went very still and very cold, not the hot rage I'd been cycling through, but something more dangerous, more focused. If this was destruction, then I would become a student of ruins. I would learn their architecture from the inside. The next morning, I cut my hair 10 inches of brown waves falling to the salon floor in a decisive surrender. The woman in the mirror looked harder, her jaw more defined without the softening frame of long hair. I withdrew the last $4,000 from my dwindling savings and paid 6 months up front for a tiny studio apartment across town. The moving truck was an economy rental I loaded myself, leaving behind furniture too large for the new space, shedding possessions like an animal abandoning fur in spring. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Meredith Green, operations director at Carlyle Partners, a mid-size competitor to my former employer. The position was 2 steps down from my previous role, but it came with something more valuable than title or compensation: proximity. Carlyle Partners and my former company shared 3 major clients, collaborated on industry committees, operated in the same professional ecosystem. My knowledge of operations and client relationships made me valuable. My eagerness to accept a reduced role made me unthreatening. Your references were... Meredith paused, searching for the diplomatic phrasing. Mixed. Can you help me understand? What happened at Westbrook? I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it like an actor preparing for the role of her lifetime. "A security breach occurred under my watch," I said, voice modulated to convey the perfect balance of regret and resilience. I was ultimately held responsible. It taught me valuable lessons about cybersecurity protocols and team oversight that I believe make me a stronger operations specialist now. Not a lie, but a careful reconstruction of truth, the same technique Daniel had used against me. 2 days later, I accepted Carlisle's offer. The salary barely covered my downsized expenses, but I wasn't building a career anymore. I was building something else entirely. In my new role, I became invisible in the way that reliable, unambitious middle managers often are. I arrived 30 minutes early each day, left precisely at 5:30, delivered exactly what was asked of me with neither remarkable flair nor concerning deficiency. I volunteered for cross-functional projects that no one else wanted: database migrations, vendor contract reviews, client satisfaction survey redesigns, unglamorous work that granted me access to systems, information, and relationships across departments. At night, in my small apartment with its institutional beige walls, I created a different kind of database. Every interaction with former colleagues from Westbrook, every industry rumor, every client complaint, every staffing change. I tracked Daniel's career with the dedication of an astronomer charting a distant celestial body, watching as he expanded his influence, collected new allies, discarded those who no longer served his ascent. 6 months into my tenure at Carlisle, I attended an industry conference in Chicago. Daniel was there, now sporting the title of Executive Vice President, his name badge hanging importantly against his custom-tailored suit. He didn't notice me at first: my new haircut, less expensive clothes, and deliberately unobtrusive demeanor creating an effective camouflage. I sat 3 rows behind him during a panel discussion on industry ethics, watching him nod emphatically at all the appropriate moments. At the evening reception, I positioned myself near the bar, angled away from the center of the room. It took 27 minutes before he approached for another drink, eyes skimming past me, then returning with the delayed recognition that comes when a familiar object appears in an unfamiliar context. "Elizabeth?" His surprise seemed genuine, quickly masked by that practiced smile. "I had no idea you were here." "Daniel," I acknowledged, raising my sparkling water in subdued greeting. "Congratulations on the promotion." His eyes did a quick assessment, cataloging my less expensive watch, my simpler hairstyle, my downgraded professional status via the company name on my badge. Satisfaction flickered briefly behind his expression. "Thank you. I heard you landed at Carlisle. Operations. Support, right? That's good. A solid place to rebuild." I nodded, letting him fill the silence, watching him grow more comfortable with each passing second. The predator convinced of the prey's harmlessness. "You know, what happened at Westbrook, I tried to speak up for you. The evidence they found was just overwhelming." He lowered his voice, leaning slightly closer. "Between us, did you have someone helping you with those data transfers? It seemed sophisticated for someone like me?" I finished, allowing a small, sad smile. No accomplices. Just bad judgment and worse luck, I suppose." Relief washed across his features. I wasn't going to make a scene, wasn't going to challenge the narrative. I had accepted my diminishment. He ordered another whiskey, more relaxed now. "Listen, I know some people at Garfield Health Systems. Nothing senior, but maybe something that would be a step up from where you are now. I could put in a word." I thanked him with precisely the right amount of pathetic gratitude, watched him bask in the role of magnanimous victor. We exchanged business cards, his heavy stock with raised lettering, mine the standard template Carlisle provided to non-executive staff. He promised to be in touch with that potential contact. I thanked him again, voice carefully modulated, to convey appropriate appreciation. That night in my hotel room, I added his new contact information to my database and opened the thumb drive he'd handed me with his business card, the one containing some templates that might help you at Carlisle. I ran it through 3 levels of security scans on my personal laptop before accessing the contents. Predictably, buried among the legitimate files was a sophisticated tracking program designed to record keystrokes and capture screen images. Daniel wasn't finished with me. He wanted insurance, wanted to know if I was a lingering threat. I transferred the malware to a secure environment for later examination, identifying its communication protocols, its triggers, its digital fingerprints. Another piece of the puzzle that was Daniel Morgan, now carefully preserved in my growing collection. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. I received a modest promotion at Carlisle recognition for my consistent, unspectacular performance and willingness to handle tedious projects no one else wanted. My new role as operations coordinator expanded my system access and put me in regular contact with the company's largest clients, including 2 that Westbrook desperately wanted to acquire. During my second performance review, Meredith noted my remarkable capacity for detail and documentation. She didn't know about the parallel records I maintained, the pattern recognition I was developing across seemingly disconnected events. The way I was learning to see ripples in professional waters and trace them back to their source. On a Tuesday in October, I received a LinkedIn message from Christopher, my former supervisor at Westbrook. "Hope you're doing well. I've moved to Thayer Group as their new operations director. Looking to build a team. Would you be open to discussing opportunities?" The message was baffling at first. Christopher had been among the first to distance himself after my termination, his recommendation permanently withdrawn. I messaged back with professional courtesy, agreeing to coffee the following week. We met at a quiet cafe near the financial district, Christopher looking older than I remembered. New lines etched around his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said after we exchanged awkward pleasantries. I should have asked more questions. Should have fought harder for a deeper investigation. I sipped my tea, waiting. He fidgeted with his cup. "Daniel's methods have become more apparent over time. There have been others since you. Not the same approach, but the same result. Careers derailed, reputations damaged. And yet he keeps advancing," I observed neutrally. Christopher nodded, eyes fixed on the table between us. "The evidence is always perfect, always just enough to create doubt without triggering criminal investigations, always structured to benefit him specifically." "Why the change of heart about me?" I asked. He finally looked up. "Because 2 months ago, I found myself in room 4C, looking at emails I supposedly sent to a competitor. I recognized the technique." He pushed a thumb drive across the table. "This is everything I managed to download before they escorted me out. Not enough to clear either of us, but patterns. Evidence of access logs being modified, timestamps changed. It's encrypted. Password is the name of the conference room where we had our last positive performance review together." I took the drive, a small piece of plastic suddenly heavy with potential. "Why not take this to the authorities?" "With what proof? It's circumstantial at best. Career suicide at worst. I just wanted you to know I believe you now, for whatever that's worth." We parted ways after an hour of careful conversation. Christopher bound for a new position in another state, as far from Daniel's sphere of influence as he could manage. The thumb drive joined my growing collection of evidence, another fragment in the mosaic I was painstakingly assembling. Winter arrived with 3 major client acquisitions for Carlisle partners, 2 of them former Westbrook clients who had grown, dissatisfied with recent service changes. I had been assigned as operational liaison for both transitions, ensuring their implementation requirements were meticulously documented and executed. Their departure represented a significant financial blow to Westbrook, and, by extension, to Daniel's division. At the annual industry holiday gala, I stood near the dessert table, now dressed in a well-fitted suit that reflected my modest professional rehabilitation. Daniel approached after his third trip to the open bar, his confidence loosened by premium liquor. "Those were my clients," he said without preamble. Voice kept low despite the flush creeping up his neck. 14 years with Westbrook, and suddenly, they jump ship to Carlisle? Did you enjoy that? Your little victory? I selected a chocolate-dipped strawberry from the display, expression mild. They made business decisions based on service quality and attention to detail. That's hardly personal. Bullshit, he hissed, leaning closer. You've been feeding them information, poaching, playing the long game. Like you did? I asked quietly, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since my termination. Something in my eyes made him step back slightly. The difference is, Daniel, I simply listened to their concerns and addressed them. No manipulation required. He recovered quickly, social mask sliding back into place as a board member from Westbrook approached. Elizabeth was just telling me about Carlisle's recent successes, he said smoothly. Always good to see former colleagues thriving, isn't it? Later that evening, I watched from across the room as Daniel introduced his wife to various executives, a willowy woman with an anxious smile who kept adjusting her jewelry, clearly uncomfortable in the aggressively networking environment. His hand remained possessively at the small of her back, steering her toward conversations with progressively more senior industry figures. I added her name to my mental archive, Caroline Morgan, another piece of the puzzle. January brought reorganization at Carlisle. My consistent performance and growing client relationships earned me a promotion to Client Success Manager, a role involving extensive travel to maintain relationships with our highest value accounts. The position came with increased visibility, a substantial raise, and most importantly, legitimate access to client feedback about competitor services, including Westbrook's. I began traveling 3 weeks of every month, establishing myself as the reliable face of Carlisle to our most important clients. In airport lounges and hotel bars, over business dinners and conference calls, I built relationships based on attentiveness and genuine problem-solving. Never once did I speak ill of Westbrook or Daniel specifically. I didn't need to. Clients volunteered their frustrations, unprompted promises made and broken, corners cut, communication delayed. Each complaint, each missed deadline, each service failure I documented meticulously in Carlisle's customer relationship management system, creating an official, time-stamped record that would be impossible to dismiss as personal vendetta. I became known for my detailed follow-up, emails. As discussed in our meeting on Tuesday, here are the specific concerns you raised about your previous provider's handling of. In March, I attended an industry leadership retreat in Arizona. Daniel was there, now with senior added, to his executive vice president title, clearly positioning for eventual C-suite consideration. We maintained professional distance, exchanging mechanical nods at general sessions. On the second evening, during a cocktail reception on a terrace overlooking the desert, I overheard his voice from behind a decorative fire pit feature. No, Caroline. It's a leadership obligatory thing. Yes, I know I promised. Look, what do you want me to do? Tell Richard I can't join their strategic dinner because my wife is lonely? They'll announce the COO succession plan next month. I moved away before he could notice me, filing away the information. The promised succession plan explained his increased networking intensity, the slightly desperate edge to his corporate socializing. Daniel was making his final push for the C-suite position he'd destroyed multiple careers to pursue. 2 weeks later, I received an unusual request from Meredith. Carlisle's CEO wanted me to present our client retention strategy at the upcoming board meeting. My data-driven approach and detailed documentation had significantly improved our renewal rates, and the executive team wanted to understand the methodology. I prepared meticulously, creating visualizations that highlighted the direct correlation between addressing specific client concerns and increased retention percentages. The presentation was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. on a Thursday. At 1:47, as I reviewed, My slides one final time in the small preparation room adjacent to the boardroom. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Is this Elizabeth Sinclair? This is Caroline Morgan. I need to speak with you urgently about Daniel. Please, call me when you can." I stared at the message, mind racing through possible scenarios. This wasn't part of my carefully constructed plan. This was an unknown variable. I silenced my phone as Meredith appeared at the door to escort me into the boardroom. The presentation went exceptionally well. Board members asked insightful questions about implementation, scalability, and competitive differentiation. I answered each with precision, referencing specific client examples and documented outcomes. The CEO mentioned potential expansion of the approach across all client segments. As we concluded, Meredith whispered that they wanted me to join the executive strategy session the following week, my first invitation to the senior leadership inner circle. In the quiet of my office afterward, I finally returned Caroline's call, heart hammering against my ribs as the phone rang. 3, 4, 5 times before she answered. "Elizabeth?" Her voice was lower than I expected, tight with what sounded like suppressed emotion. "Thank you for calling back. I know this is strange. We've never met, but I need to talk to you about Daniel, about what happened at Westbrook." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "I'm not sure I understand." "Please," she said, the word carrying the weight of exhaustion. "I followed him last night. He said he was working late, but—" A shaky breath. "I found him at the Meridian Hotel with his laptop open, accessing someone else's accounts. When I confronted him, he said terrible things about you, about Christopher, about how you both had tried to sabotage him. But the things he was doing, I've seen similar things before. Documents open that weren't his." My hand tightened around the phone. "Mrs. Morgan, he's been doing this for years, hasn't he?" she interrupted, voice suddenly stronger. "You weren't the first. Christopher wasn't the last. There was someone at his previous company too, a woman named Diane who supposedly leaked confidential information. He used to check her social media obsessively after we moved here, like he was monitoring her downfall." The silence stretched between us, heavy with implication. Finally, I asked, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I found something when I took his computer." Her voice had dropped to a near whisper. "Notes, screenshots, a whole system for accessing other people's accounts, and records of you, of Christopher, of other people I don't know. Evidence of what he did, what he's still doing. I think he's planning something similar for Richard, now that the COO position is opening." My carefully maintained composure threatened to crack. "Do you still have these records?" "Yes. And I've made copies. I want to meet. I've been afraid for so long, but watching him last night, seeing how coldly he manipulated things. The person I saw wasn't the man I married. His ambition has become something monstrous." We arranged to meet the following evening at a quiet cafe across town. As I ended the call, a strange lightness spread through my chest. Not triumph, but something quieter. The careful architecture of my patience was revealing its final form. Caroline arrived at our meeting spot wearing oversized sunglasses despite the evening hour, her hands visibly shaking as she placed an external hard drive on the table between us. "Everything's here," she said quietly. The access logs, the email drafts, the documentation of how he altered timestamps. He kept it all like trophies. I didn't touch the drive immediately. "Why now, Caroline? You must have suspected something before this." She removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes and a fading bruise near her temple. "Because last night when I confronted him, I saw something I can't unsee. And because I finally realized that being Mrs. Daniel Morgan isn't protection, it's just a different kind of target." She pushed the drive closer to me. "I don't know what you'll do with this. I don't want to know. But people should know who he really is. The drive contained exactly what she'd described: meticulously organized evidence of Daniel's systematic destruction of at least 7 careers across 3 companies. The pattern was always the same: identify rising talent who posed competitive threat, gain their trust, access their systems, fabricate evidence of wrongdoing, ensure discovery by the right authority figures. The most recent folder contained preliminary research on Richard Winters, the current COO whose position Daniel coveted. For 3 days, I reviewed the files, comparing them against my own collected evidence, fitting pieces together into an undeniable narrative. I made secure copies, storing them in multiple locations. Then I made 3 calls to Christopher, to the first victim I could locate named Diane Fredericks, and finally to Maya Davis, the HR director who had slid that damning folder across the table to me 2 years earlier. I have evidence that you need to see, I told each of them, voice calm, professional. Evidence that may change your understanding of certain events at Westbrook. The meeting took place in a private conference room at Carlyle's legal firm. Christopher and Diane arrived first, followed by a hesitant Maya, whose professional demeanor cracked visibly when presented with the systematic evidence of how she'd been manipulated into executing Daniel's carefully orchestrated character assassinations. "These access logs," she whispered, scrolling through timestamps that had been altered, then restored in Caroline's evidence. "They directly contradict what was presented to me. The origination points for the data breaches. They all trace back to temporary access credentials issued to IT for system maintenance, credentials that Daniel had authorized." Christopher nodded grimly. "The same technique was used against me, and against Diane before us. Diane, now working as an independent consultant after failing to secure corporate employment following her termination, sat with rigid posture, eyes fixed on the evidence of her professional execution. "I always knew," she said quietly. "But proving it, I couldn't find the thread to pull." "What happens now?" Maya asked, the weight of her unwitting complicity visible in her expression. I closed my laptop. "That depends on Westbrook. This evidence shows a pattern of deliberate sabotage, identity theft, data manipulation, and fraud across multiple years and victims. It would survive legal discovery. It would withstand public scrutiny." The next morning, Richard Winters received a comprehensive file containing all the evidence, along with sworn statements from Christopher, Diane, myself, and most damagingly, Caroline. By afternoon, security was escorting Daniel from the Westbrook building. By evening, the company's legal team had reached out to begin discussion of settlements with each of his victims. I didn't watch Daniel's downfall in person. I didn't need to. The carefully constructed ecosystem of professional contacts I'd rebuilt over 2 years carried the news to me in real-time text messages, emails, phone calls describing the shockwaves rippling through Westbrook as Daniel's systematic destruction of colleagues was exposed. 3 weeks later, I received a formal letter from Westbrook offering a significant settlement, full reinstatement of professional references, and a public statement acknowledging the falsity of claims that had led to my termination. Similar letters reached Christopher, Diane, and the others. Caroline filed for divorce the same week, her settlement negotiations bolstered by the evidence she had provided against her husband. The industry newsletter announced my promotion to Vice President of Client Success at Carlyle the following month, the culmination of 2 years of deliberate, methodical rebuilding. The congratulatory messages poured in, including one from Richard Winters, who had survived Daniel's machinations and retained his COO position at Westbrook. Daniel himself seemed to vanish, his LinkedIn profile dormant, his industry presence erased. I heard through former colleagues that he had taken a significantly reduced position at a small firm in another state, his carefully cultivated reputation now permanently tarnished by the evidence of his methodical destruction of others. In my new office with its window overlooking the city, I sometimes think about that rainy day when I left Westbrook clutching a cardboard box, identity and career in tatters. About the cold clarity that had settled over me as I watched raindrops race. down my apartment window, about the patient, methodical process of rebuilding not just a career, but the credibility needed to deliver justice. There's a certain power in being underestimated, in being dismissed as defeated. It creates a kind of invisibility that allows for careful, deliberate movement beneath the surface of perception. Daniel never saw me coming because he believed he had already dispatched me, reduced me to irrelevance in the professional landscape he navigated so confidently. His mistake was fundamental. He saw destruction as an endpoint rather than a transformation. He discarded people once they were broken, never considering that broken things can be rebuilt into something more resilient, more determined, more dangerous than before. I keep Caroline's last text message saved in my phone sent the day after. Daniel's removal from Westbrook. Thank you for showing me that patterns can be broken. I never responded. Some acknowledgments are better left in silence. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it's just the patient accumulation of truth, waiting for the precise moment when the weight becomes undeniable. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction at all, but about restoration of truth, of reputation, of the natural order that ambition twisted out of alignment. The sky outside my window is that same shade of blue. It was 5 years ago when I first understood my destruction had been meticulously planned. But now, standing in an office earned through legitimate achievement rather than sabotage, I understand something else. There is no victory in becoming what destroyed you. The real victory is in transcending it, building something stronger on the ruins, something with integrity that cannot be corrupted or undermined. Daniel sought power through destruction. I found it through reconstruction. In the end, that made all the difference.